Hi everyone, welcome back to another continuing education check-in. Today is super exciting. We're talking all about conflict. And we're trying to figure out, is conflict good or bad? And for our end segment, we're bringing back their 10 but, and we have a lot of fun scenarios to talk about, and we're just gonna jump right in. And so I think we're both gonna say whether we think conflict is good or bad, and we have to pick one.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
No safe answer.
Right.
Okay. Do you want to go first, Ethan?
Okay. So I think conflict is bad. And
okay.
to be honest, I didn't think this was a hot take.
Yeah.
But so many people are now on the train of conflict is good.
I think, like, obviously not, if I had to pick one between the two, I'm going to have to say conflict is good.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I'm one of those so many people that are on the train of conflict is good.
Yeah. You have to tell me more.
I think obviously there's, like, scenarios for both. I'm sure you could agree that, like, there's situations where conflict is bad. Like, if you're just about to walk into, like, family dinner and you're creating problems or you're causing a fight, bad timing for sure. But I feel like if we forget about the timing of things, I feel like in general conflict is good because it's two people expressing what they truly need. And that's what I really like about it, because, like, it's, like, true, authentic, good communication. And I really, because, like, it's certain stuff that you wouldn't bring up in your day-to-day life, in your regular routine when you're hanging out, you're cooking, you're getting groceries, you're doing whatever. You're not going to, like, be bringing up these topics, but it gives you, this conflict gives you, like, a nice, I want to say almost like a safe space to bring up, like, hey, you know how you, like, never hang out with me when I'm with my friends. Like, I actually don't really like it. Like, so it gives you this, like, a position to just bring up things that are bothering you.
But that's only if you're doing conflict well.
Okay.
And the space that you're talking about is great. It's a safe space. You can bring up feedback for each other and things that you've noticed in the relationship, and it doesn't have to feel bad.
Right.
But a lot of times conflict is a lot more than that. It's calling each other out, wanting to prove that you're right.
Right.
Digging stuff up from the grave.
True.
And then yelling.
I agree. And, like, the really sad truth and reality is that conflict often begins with that. Because what is conflict? Conflict is when two people are in a disagreement, right?
Yeah.
You said something was one way and I'm saying something is a different way. And oftentimes, yes, you're right, when the conflict begins, when it initially is in, like, the rising action almost, then it is like, you're yelling at each other. Your intention is to hurt the other person.
Yeah.
But I think, because I've been the person that's tried to hurt the other person, I'm not even just talking about relationships, like, even friendships, even, like, discussions with family members. I feel like in the beginning, because you're so shocked that this person that you love so much is, like, not able to understand you, or maybe they're, like, assuming the worst about you. So in the beginning, it's like rising action, and you're kind of, like, hurting the other person because you don't feel yet that you're in a place where it's safe to share your ideas. Does that make sense? So sure, yes, when you're yelling, when you're doing all of these bad actions in this conflict, of course it's, like, not productive. But I personally feel, in all my experience, because I've usually been, like, the yeller or, like, the one that gets more emotional during a conflict, that if you can get past this first, like, 5-10 minutes of, like, oh, we're yelling, we're, like, mad at each other, whatever, then, like, the only way that this conflict can be resolved is by that safe space of talking. So you always have to go through that safe space of talking before you get out of it. And that's why I think conflict is good.
I see. So I don't know what world you live in, but for me, it's never 5 to 10 minutes of that rising action, that first stage.
Okay.
For me, sometimes it's days where there's silent treatment.
Right.
And there's passive aggression. Right. And then there's, like, a lot of anger and bitterness in words.
Okay. And, like, true.
And so the reason, I guess, it's fair how you define conflict. Conflict is when you have disagreement between two people in a relationship, and I guess when you look at the whole process, like you just talked about, the what usually happens is you're in a better place than where you started.
Right.
But I think for me, I'm saying conflict is bad because that very first part that you talked about
Right.
can leave scars.
This is true.
But then a lot of times in conflict, if you're not approaching things well, by the end of the conflict, you might feel like there's resolution and you
Right.
feel more confident on the way forward.
Right.
But a lot of times, it's fake.
True.
And people haven't really worked things out.
That's
They've
true.
just hit it.
Okay.
And it will come up next time.
This is fair.
And that's why I think conflict is bad.
Okay. I guess I want to talk more about this, like that you're saying about like, oh, you just hide it and you're not actually resolving the conflict.
Yeah.
Because then I do agree. Then it turns into like a very like a longer timeline. And like then I feel like if you've not actually resolved it and like actually have like a clear heart after it,
Yeah.
then like every little thing I think could like irk you and it would turn into that big snowball. And it's like, dude, I just like left the dishes in the sink. Like why are you so upset about dishes in the sink?
Right.
But it's like it's because that scar, that actual initial problem isn't healed.
Yeah.
And I do also acknowledge as being somebody who is very active in the initial rising action of the conflict. And I want to say was, but I don't know. I can't say that about myself, I think, yet. But I do agree that the beginning part can leave scars.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I've had people that are very close to me tell me that, like, hey, like, I know that you love me a lot. And I know that you're, like, a good person. You care, blah, blah, blah. You don't mean any of these hurtful things. But just the fact that you let them out, it made them a reality. Like, you can say you don't mean them because you said them. But for me, it's hard to understand that you didn't mean them, and I still feel bad by them.
Exactly.
So I do totally understand that, and I do, if we're on the subject of conflict, I do 1,000% believe that you need to reel it in, even in that beginning part. That rising action, like there should be a certain cap. Like you cannot rise beyond this point. Like it's getting disrespectful. It's getting like hard for the other person to come back. Because historically, I say a lot of very harsh, really rude things. But, like, genuinely, like, moments later, as soon as the conflict is resolved, it's like I was in, like, a trance. It's like I lost control of my body.
Yeah.
And then, for me, like, I have no, like, let's say I said you are so untrustworthy, Ethan. Like, I hate you. Like, I never liked you to begin with. Something super harsh. And it's just like, dude, like, we were talking about dishes in the sink. What do you mean you never liked me to begin with? Mm-hmm. And then when the conflict is over, for me, it's just like, oh, I've woken up from the trance. Like, I don't mean that. I don't even remember saying I never liked you to begin with.
Right.
But the other person, you've heard it.
Yeah.
Those words are reality to you now.
Right. I think it's a good litmus test if what you're feeling after that rising action part is that you wish you could undo everything.
Yeah.
That's probably when you've gone too far.
Yes.
But then I do want to ask you on that, Sania. That's a type of boundary to figure out what level will you not go past.
Right.
Is that something that you should set for yourself or something you should discuss with your partner to figure out for the both of you?
I truly think that that's something you have to set for yourself. I think that's like a personal mission to improve. And it's so embarrassing to be on here and like admitting this, but like I've had a very hard time with this. Like historically, I feel like I'm pretty hot-headed. Like, I don't know, from my dad. I don't know what to blame it on. And, like, it's something that people that I care about have brought up to me numerous times. But it's genuinely, like, even though they're bringing it up and they're saying, hey, Sania, like, you can't actually talk to me like this or, like, whatever, that's not really changing it. Like, I'm still doing it. So I feel like the real change comes because, like you said, when you sit with that guilt after the fact and, like, again, it feels like you're in a trance. You don't really mean the words. You're like, why is this person hurt? I didn't even mean it. But it's like you have to think about if you heard those words from someone that you really loved. Yeah. And I think that really changes and you're like, oh my God, like, I would hate that. Mm-hmm. And I think we talked a lot about, like, serial dater on this podcast, and, like, he has very good conflict strategies. There's, like, a limit that he never crosses. Mm-hmm. He's, like, treat everybody like your colleague if you have to, like, whatever you need to do. Like, you can love someone and be very close to them, but when you feel yourself getting upset, treat them like a colleague. Like, treat them as something that puts a little distance between you so you do not cross that boundary.
Yeah. But I guess now that I'm thinking about it, I think it can be something that you discuss with your partner. Okay. And sometimes it can be helpful because I think it's hard to be aware of how you are during a conflict.
Right.
And so I think it's important to talk about, hey, I don't think we should get physical when we're fighting.
Okay.
Or I don't think that we should yell. Mm-hmm. Or maybe we can yell if it gets to that point, but definitely not in public, definitely not in front of our friends or family.
Okay, wait. I think I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I do think that after said conflict, there should be like a little moment of like, okay, now we're closer together, and saying that like, oh, now we have closeness, and now we can talk about like, oh, how do we make things better?
Yeah.
Okay, so I feel like we had some very good discussion on like, you know, what conflict is, all the different parts of conflict, you know, the rising action, what do you do in the falling action, and like in the aftermath of like, hey, lessons learned.
Yeah.
I don't feel that this is productive when we're in a fight, when you bring stuff back from the grave. Like, I don't, you know, if we've shelved a topic, we should leave it there. So these are all very good strategies. So I think what we're kind of getting to is talking about like, how do you approach conflict in a good way?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have ideas, Ethan?
This is hard. I'm still trying to figure out for myself how to do that. There are a couple strategies that I'll start with. And one thing is to always do it in person.
Yeah.
Because like over phone, over FaceTime, over text, things can just get misunderstood so easily. I make assumptions because I don't understand what they're really trying to say. Even over phone, like, I don't know why, but the reception just wants to like cut out at the most important points, and like sometimes I just can't hear or like understand the
and then
point.
In that moment when you say, wait, sorry, can you say that again, the other person gets mad. They're like, what, like you weren't listening, blah blah blah.
I also have a tendency to interrupt people over the phone because I think that they're
done talking.
Exactly.
Totally. And I think we've had this issue we've talked about when we're filming our podcast, even like virtually versus like in person. It's easier to read social cues and know like, okay, she's done talking. She's not just taking a long pause.
Yeah, that's right. And then I think another strategy is if you feel really heated in the moment and you're just angry and you're unable to go to sleep or you're unable to think about anything else, then that's a sign that you probably should not fight or like bring up these issues right away.
Okay.
I think a lot of times approaching conflict well means that you're already less emotional. So you've brought it down to a level where you're not angry anymore.
Yeah, when you're not feeling you versus them, maybe when you're feeling more like, hey, this is a problem, we need to solve this together.
So that is, I think, the ideal, but it's really hard to get there.
It is.
And I think just feeling like this is not your top priority anymore. So what I mean by that is you could hop on a call with your family and you can not be bothered about what the other person did in the moment. That's when you know like the emotional roller coaster has come down to like a manageable point and you can talk about it.
I think this thing that you just said is like the hardest thing ever to do. Like to come to a point of the conflict where you're like not bothered by it that much that it's like controlling your every waking thought and every action. Like I remember there was times where I was like in a fight with like my old roommate that I used to live with, and like I literally physically was unable to work. Like I'd be staring at my screen and I was like, oh, this is what I would say to her, and I would like just start writing down like on my notes app on a piece of paper like, oh, this is what she did wrong, this is like da da da, and like making bulleted points, and it's just like that's obviously not a good time to talk.
Yeah. So I think that is a good way to like approach it, because even for you, writing this stuff down, not trying to beat her to death right away.
Right.
And then you have to do whatever like
whatever you can
you.
do. Yeah.
So maybe that's like watching like your favorite podcast or listening to some music or calling a best friend or your sister or something.
I feel like in those situations though, when I'm in like when my body's feeling like I'm in a problem, it's really hard. Like even when I call the best friend, I'm talking about the conflict. I feel like a really weird thing that could possibly work, that has worked, like I said, I've only experienced good conflict resolution maybe with one or two people in my life, sadly. But it could just be like we can go back to the Star Guy strategy and just be like, okay, there's conflict. I know the only thing that's going to soothe my heart, like I feel worse about this conflict because I love this person. I feel so distanced from them.
Yeah.
So like, let's just like be in La La Land for a second. And me and my roommate have done this so much. Like we're in the middle of like a fight. We haven't talked for days. And like either she'll come to my room and be like, hey, like I'm going to the grocery store. Do you want to come? Something super low stakes. We know we're in a fight. We're not crazy. We obviously haven't talked about it yet. But then we've done the groceries. We're talking about the bananas and the apples. And then we can like come home and be like, hey, so like, listen, this is what we were upset about. And then it could be a much better dialogue.
Yeah.
Because then you feel closeness again. So you're not trying to attack and hurt the other person. You're dealing with it with love.
Yeah. Yeah. That is the goal. I think we need to explain a little more how to make that mindset shift of I need to be right. I need to get my point through versus let's approach this as a team. Let's figure out what's going on both sides.
Yeah,
and then,
let's understand each other. Yeah.
How do you get to that point?
I think that's the part that, like, as much as we want to say that this has to do with the other person, I feel like that's the part that is on you. Because I feel like in any conflict, if one person is like off the walls, bonkers, angry, and the other person is still like, hey, like, okay, go ahead. This is like a space for you. Like, it just takes one person to reel it in and like make this conflict resolution like in a positive direction. So I feel like this is like internal work that people should try to do, where they're like, hey, I know myself. I'm sitting with my feelings. I'm writing away those notes of like, I hate you because, and I know that I'm super upset and I'm super hurt and like this person doesn't understand me. They never loved me, cared for me. I feel like in that moment, you have to remind yourself of their good stuff, which is hard to do. I feel like you have to remember that, like, I think you have to ask yourself, is this conflict so big that I don't want them in my life anymore? If that's your answer, dude, go off the walls. Like, go crazy. Do whatever you want. Like, you don't want them. You're in self-destruct mode anyways. But if this is a person you care for and you want to keep around in your life, I think you have to think about that and act accordingly.
Okay, but you don't mean literally do whatever you want.
No.
Don't pull out, like, a 9 or something, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think that makes sense. I think also to make it easier for the other person to have that mindset of approaching it as a team and not trying to have one side win over the other. One thing that makes it a lot smoother to get to that point is when both of you are willing to own your mistakes.
Yes.
So this like takes some time and takes some previous conflicts to get to that point. But when you own what you did and you take responsibility, then it makes it easier for the other person to say, oh, this person can take feedback.
Yeah.
I don't have to just like shoot them down every time we fight.
I think when you go into a conflict, again, everything we're talking about is super hard to do. But as someone who's very hot-headed, I've tried to do these things and they've been helpful. You shouldn't enter that discussion, after you put the groceries away, you shouldn't enter the discussion of like, oh, hey, like these are all the things you did wrong and like this is what you need to stop. You need to think about yourself during the conflict, which is so counterintuitive. But you have to be like, hey, like, what did I do to upset you? What can I do better? And that way the other person is talking to you more with love and you're genuinely trying to improve what you did so that it doesn't happen again. Like, that is the way to solve it. Like, you telling them everything they did wrong is not the best way to solve it. You can say it to them in a productive way, like, hey, do you mind doing this in this other way? Yeah. But you should really be focused on, like, what part did I have to play and how can I avoid this in the future?
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to be in this constant loop and you're not going to be able to really get out of it.
I actually think that when there's a disagreement or there's some frustration, I'm starting to believe that there's a way to avoid the whole rising action part of conflict.
Wow.
Where there's no silent treatment or angry words.
Right.
And you can just talk it out. And of course, there's going to be some tension because you're trying to figure out something that has bothered you. And I think in those moments, you have to force yourself to be a good listener, but also force yourself to be willing to talk about things as they come up and not.
Oh yeah, don't let them build up.
Yeah.
So you have like a list of bullet points to go through.
Yeah, but do you agree with me that
I do.
you can avoid and
I
just
do
talk it out?
Like I said, I've seen a few people in my life that I've been really inspired by. I was like, wow, like how can you resolve this conflict so well?
Yeah.
Like without you hating the other person or without there being bad blood, like you can still talk to the other person with a smile. And I think it's totally possible. I think it just comes back to you being a good communicator, which means effectively being able to say what you want to say without using it as a tool to hurt someone else.
Yeah. And so you can mention explicitly, like, I want to approach this as a team.
Yes.
This is how I feel, and I want to find a way that I can do better for you.
Yeah.
But then a way to do better that will help the both of us moving forward.
I think one other final thing that we would want to touch on this topic is when and how should you avoid conflict? Like, when is it a situation where you should actually be like, you know what? Yes, this bothered me, but it's not such a big deal that I even think it needs to be brought up. I think this is something I can process on my own and do subtle things to resolve it without it needing to be a big sit-down discussion. I think, I don't know if people can tell, but I've been very focused on myself lately. So again, even for this, I would say you have to sit with yourself and answer the question of like, hey, how much did this bother me? Do I want to bring this up? Or can I figure this out on my own and be like, you know what, actually the daily dishes in the sink is not that big of a problem. I think I can just subtly be like, either just start doing them myself. That's one strategy. Or I can make a bigger mess next to it. So that, you know, like maybe you can find a different way to resolve that conflict. And maybe that doesn't need to be like oh, but I feel like you don't respect me when you don't keep the space clean. And like, you know, maybe it doesn't need to turn into that. So you just have to ask yourself, how bothered are you by this? And how badly do you need to be heard and understood to get it resolved, I think. If there's like passive ways to resolve it, that's great.
I think that sounds good, but then it's always hardest in the moment to know exactly what to do, because you see the dishes in the sink, you are already feeling like all the emotions, and at least for me, I react immediately.
No, true.
And so I think for me, what I've learned that I think is useful for everyone out there is to consistently communicate. So I see something that frustrates me, and maybe we're with our friends, so I'm not going to bring it up in the moment.
Right.
And I'm going to try my best not to react, because people can tell based on my face and my actions and my words. And so in the moment with other people, I'm not going to bring it up. But if we're alone and something happens that I'm upset about, I can say, hey, I'm not sure about how I feel about what just happened, or this, the dishes in the sink, or the way you spoke.
Right.
I need some time to think about it and process it, and I would like to talk with you, but this doesn't change how I feel about you.
Yeah.
I just want you to know that I need a little bit of time to think this through.
Yeah.
And even saying something like that is really helpful.
Yeah.
And this is actually what I wanted to say before. One really effective strategy in communication in conflict is to reassure the other person. Because you're doing conflict well, you're doing conflict bad, it doesn't matter. Emotions are running high.
Yeah.
And this goes back to reassuring the other person that you love them, that you care about them, that this doesn't change
how you feel about them.
Exactly.
Yeah, like long term, like this is a momentary thing. We want to, at the end of this momentary thing, when it passes, we want togetherness.
Yeah.
So reminding them that like, hey, I still love you. Like I disagree and I'd love to talk about it, but I do still love you. Like, and then it just like all of a sudden that person's like, all right, we're on the same team.
Yeah.
I think it gets very challenging when you're like, oh, I don't know if I want this to continue and things like that, because then you can let yourself be more rude because you're like, maybe I don't want this person in my life.
Yeah.
But as somebody, this was like a lessons learned in my life. I think it shouldn't be so easy to cut people off. I think you should always treat somebody with the respect that they deserve, and always treat them like you would want them in your life and that you love them, and then whatever happens, happens.
Yeah. I also think that in conflict, it's important to avoid the extremes.
Yeah.
So one extreme is making an ultimatum, like, I don't want to be with you anymore.
Right.
I've never liked you. And then the other extreme is ignoring it.
Yeah.
And not responding, just being
like,
quiet,
"Oh, yeah,
not taking accountability.
Right.
And so both extremes need to be avoided. It's going to be really hard because your personality might be suited towards one more than just being level-headed. But
Right.
this is important because you might feel like you want to break up in the moment, and that is valid to feel, but that is not the right time to bring it up.
Yeah.
It is not going to help
The situation.
at all. It's just going to make things worse. And so
Right.
you can feel that, but you need to table it and then think about it later. And then if you want to break up when you're not in a conflict.
Right.
But then also on the other side, you want to just run away from the problem. You want to ignore it, pretend like nothing happened. When you do that, you're going to make the other person more angry and want to confront you more. And you're not actually going to be able to run away. Maybe you run away, but then the next time the conflict comes, it's going to be even worse.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Okay. I think...
I'm not done. You're trying to hold me back. I'm spitting. We started this, I'm finishing it. So I think the last thing that I want to say is one thing.
Don't worry, this is a safe space for you to talk.
I appreciate that. We avoided the rising action. Lydia has mentioned, and if you guys haven't met Lydia, watch episode 14. Talks about always saying yes to a first date. But she has mentioned that a lot of times in fighting, it's because you're not getting what you want when you want it.
Yeah, the when.
Yes. And so when we mentioned before about taking some time to calm down, do something as an outlet for your emotions, and that is soothing for you, that is addressing the second half of why you're frustrated in the first place, that you're not getting what you want when you want it. And a lot of times, like after some time has passed, that's when we see things more clearly and we're like, oh, I didn't actually need that right then and there.
Right.
And this is actually not like a life or death thing.
True.
And I know why it bothered me at that time, but this is... It's always the most dangerous to address something in the present. And that is just like a little bit of a warning, but just a helpful thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, super, super. Yeah, she's really wise.
Yeah.
Okay, Ethan, are you feeling ready to wrap up this topic, at least for today?
I guess we have to.
All right. So we're doing they're a 10, but the first scenario is they're a 10, but they don't know how to cook. And we mean like cooking in the kitchen, not like any other kind.
Yeah. And let's say like they actually don't know.
Yeah.
So maybe like the only thing that they can do is like
frozen food or something. Okay.
Yeah. Or boxed food.
Totally.
Okay.
All right.
I'm ready.
Are you ready? Okay. 3, 2, 1.
An 8.
Yeah.
That is crazy. Why?
I was going to go even 9.
A 9?
An 8 or 9.
What?
This might be me being very traditional in gender
Wait,
norms.
I'm not telling you yet. I need to hear what you had to say.
Because I think cooking is a life skill that you can learn. Like, I don't think I knew how to cook, like, off the bat. I feel like if somebody doesn't know, like, that's something fun. We can cook together and we can learn. Like, of course, if I'm asking you to peel, like, a carrot and you don't know what a peeler looks like that's a little challenge. Or if I'm asking you to, like, you know, get something out of a can, like, get out canned chickpeas and you have never touched a can opener in your life, it's a challenge. But is it a problem? No, I can show you how to use a can opener.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's like the end of the world.
Okay, I hear you, and I kind of think the same way. But then the question to me is, well, if they can learn it and it's important just to have a healthy life, to be independent, how come they haven't done it
I
themselves?
think people have importance on different things. Like I don't know, I feel like, you know, like some people don't care about like decorating their house because they're like, oh, this isn't my final house. Or some people don't care about like, I don't know, like going to the gym all the time, or like maybe they don't care about going on walks all the time because they're like, oh, I'm doing this other thing. I feel like people have different things in their lives that are important to them at that moment in their life. So like maybe cooking wasn't the most important thing at that moment. As long as you can survive and, you know, you're not like struggling to keep alive, like I think it's okay and you could just learn it.
Okay. Okay, I'll go to an 8. I was at a 6.
Yeah.
But I think you make a strong point. And part of it is, are they willing to learn?
Yes.
And then the other part is, even if they didn't know how to cook, are they still taking care of themselves well? And that is more important overall.
Okay.
It would be nice though.
It would be nice. The next one up is if they've been put on some sort of improvement plan at work. So if they've been pulled up at work, you know, maybe because something they were doing wasn't the best or something like that. Okay. So, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Oh, here we go. Okay, I don't know why you wanted to do this so quick. You're at a 6, I'm at a 10.
Yes, go ahead.
This is the first time I've ever...
Given a 10?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Ethan.
Okay, so I've been put on an improvement plan at work. I didn't expect to say this.
Yeah.
But I am saying it. I've been put on an improvement plan at work, and I'm a 10.
Yeah.
Why are you saying
No,
that?
yeah, this is true.
There's like a couple of things that go into it. So, did they take the improvement plan well? Like, did they...
Oh, yeah, how did they react to it?
Yeah, how did they react?
That's fair.
Are they actually taking this as an opportunity to improve themselves?
Okay.
Because I believe that at the end of the day, like, we all mess up. Like, as human beings...
That's true.
We're not perfect.
Okay.
And so, I like... This is an example of how I'm not perfect. And did I deal with it well? I've tried. Maybe like not the best that I could have done, but I think the attitude matters a lot. Whether or not I've kept the job, and then there's like so many other things that go into a person outside of work.
That's true. Okay, I'm gonna change mine to an 8, only because not just because I know you. I knew that you were on.
6 now.
I knew that you were on an improvement plan. I think because. Like just because of what you were saying about like if there's a lot more to a person, and sometimes like you don't know, and I think how they deal with the improvement plan matters more than the fact that they were pulled up for something in the first place. So
Yeah.
it's like positive conflict resolution, I think.
Yeah.
All right. The last one is they're a 10, but they do not keep up to date with the news. And I think in this, we don't mean like, you know, you in general, in the peripheral, know what's going on. I think it means like being well educated and like having an opinion. You don't have to be very strong with an opinion. You don't have to impose your opinion. But I think people should have an opinion. Is that what?
Oh, I meant like it is in the peripheral. They know what's going on.
Oh, okay. We can do that.
Okay.
Just that they're aware that they're not living in la la land completely. Okay.
Right.
That so that they don't keep up with the news. So that they are in la la land.
They are in la la land.
All right. Are you ready? It's a hard one.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
You're at a 5. I'm at a 3.
Very similar again.
Yeah.
I think I could drop down a little. Maybe you could come up a little. I don't know.
Okay.
I think. Okay.
It's Thursday.
I think I'm at a 5 because I think it is important to know what's going on in the world, because I feel like, sure, you know, you have your day-to-day stuff that you do, but I feel like your actions should be oriented towards something, or you should have a goal, or you should have like some sort of beliefs or values, and like knowing about what's going on in the world and like the news and like keeping up with that stuff like helps to shape those beliefs and values.
Yeah. I think that just knowing what is going on is important because you can live life only caring about yourself, but I think it's important to know what's going on out there and to care about people who are losing their life and problems of poverty and hunger. And
I think it's very privileged to choose to not know these things. And I feel like it definitely makes you more of a selfish person, which I think is like not a very good trait. So honestly, Ethan, I might drop down to a 3 from a 5. Because I think it builds compassion and like gratefulness and like, you know, like you should have a drive to want to help people of the world, like to be like a global citizen and not just be in your own head and worry about all your problems all the time. Like, you know, it's nice that you can take a step back and you want to help.
I think that one thing that maybe skates under the radar is if we don't deal with the world's problems, eventually it's going to come back and affect us. Look, we like to think we can live in a bubble and just be safe all the time, but like these problems, they just get worse and worse.
Yeah, they're like for all of us to deal with.
And it's a boomerang. It will come back at some point. And so do you care enough to at least know what's going on? That is the first step.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Well, we hope that this episode was helpful for you, and you can let us know what you think, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.